Hey there, it's Lara here with your weekly astrology forecast. This one is for the week of September 22nd to the 28th, 2021. Thanks for being here. So, happy equinox. We are at the point in the year when the sun is moving into the sign of Libra, and that signifies a balance point in the year, right? So, that time when just for a moment there are equal parts of day and night. So in the northern hemisphere we're moving into the fall or autumnal equinox, and in the south into the spring, right? But it is that regardless, it's the balance point where everything is in perfect symmetry, harmony, balance, just for a moment. And so it's a really good time for us to reflect on that notion of balance and what it really means, right? So we're going to do that today in today's video, and we're going to talk a lot about Mercury Retrograde, which is coming up on the 27th. Mercury is stationing retrograde in the sign of Libra on the 27th. So that's significant. And it's significant for a few reasons that we're going to talk about. Mercury is having a serious conversation with Pluto, and we're going to talk a little bit about Eris as well in this video, which I haven't done in a while. Eris, the goddess of discord, right? She's playing a role here as well. So excuse me, we have a lot to talk about, and it's interesting because as I'm reflecting on your initial thought when you're thinking about Libra, right? And it's like when you're thinking about the notion of balance, is that balance, right? Balance. Doesn't everybody want balance in their lives? Balance is something good to strive for, right? We want balance. We want to feel a sense of peace and harmony and all of those things. But I think sometimes we lose sight of what it takes to get there. And we lose sight of, what kind of balance are we actually talking about? And we lose sight of maybe the fact that sometimes to restore balance, things need to kind of go off kilter for a little while, right? So all things that I'm going to talk about in today's video, so I hope you stick around. I want to let you in on something before we go any further here, though. On the topic of balance and restoring some balance to my own to my own life over this time, I'm going to take a bit of a hiatus from doing weekly videos. So I'm going to, for the time being, I'm gonna make it every 2 weeks. I'm gonna pop in here for every lunation, right? So every new moon and every full moon. So every couple of weeks, I will be here to do a video for you. But I need to take a bit of a step back because, these videos actually take some time to do, and I don't even do any editing. This is like a straight cut. It is what it is, right? You get what you get. But it does take preparation time. It takes setup time. It takes time to upload. It takes time to, put out there on YouTube and other social media channels. And this is all out of my own time, right? And resources. And so I have other things that I really have to focus on that have been neglected, like my website and various other things that I have to get done. So I'm feeling a little bit out of balance right now, or out of integrity, if you will. And so I need to take a step back and regroup a little. And the Mercury retrograde is a perfect time for all of us to do that. So I'm just letting you know. So you won't see me next week, but I'll be back October 6th, which will be the next new moon. So I'll be back to do a video for you then, all right? But in the meantime, you can definitely catch me, on Facebook and Instagram, and the links to those networks are below. So you can come over there if you want more frequent sort of updates that are less lengthy than this. And you can also definitely join my mailing list at astrologymaven.com, where you will be notified when my new website launches and everything that comes with that. And you'll also get my free guide to working with the moon when you do that as well. So enough about all of that. We have the moon in Aries right now. And that moon, as the moon moves through Aries, it's triggering the cardinal axis, right? Which is Libra and also Cancer and Capricorn. And this is something to take note of because these energies are factoring in to the goings on over the Mercury retrograde and over Libra season. So when the moon moves through Aries these couple of days, she's triggering those energies, right? And the moon in Aries is can be a bit emotionally impulsive, can be a bit one-sided sort of thing in their, a bit self-righteous potentially, a bit reactionary, triggered kind of thing. But moon in Aries, often it's like there can be a trigger and a blow up and then it's over sort of thing. That's Aries, right? And Aries being the sign of, I, me, mine sort of thing, can be a little bit less clued in to the emotions of others. And so when we're talking about the moon moving through Aries, but the moon in Aries is good for, exerting your independence. It's good for speaking your mind. It's good for, getting in touch with, your anger. It's good for even doing things that are physical. Aries is a fire sign, very physical sign. It's good for those kinds of things, right? So that's moon in Aries. And then on Thursday, the moon's going to move into Taurus, where the moon really likes to be. But during that time, the moon will cross over Uranus, right? And Uranus is in an opposition with Venus. So we're going to talk about that in a minute here. And then on Saturday evening, the moon will move into Gemini. And then, so potential for a lot of sort of communication over that sort of Saturday night, Sunday kind of thing. And into Monday as well. A lot of sort of exchange of information and chattiness and that kind of thing when moon is in Gemini. And then and maybe even sort of emotional fickleness is possible too with the moon in Gemini. And then on Tuesday, the moon will move into Cancer. So that's where the moon is at. And we are, Wednesday the 22nd. This is the equinox point, like I was mentioning. So the equinox happens when the sun enters the sign of Libra. And that is officially at 3:21 p.m. Eastern time. That's my time zone, so that's what I use. You can adjust accordingly. The interesting thing about this is when the sun moves into Libra, the sun enters the sign of its fall. Not fall like the season, but when we're talking about dignities and debilities in traditional astrology, Libra is the sign of the sun's fall. And so meaning that when a sign is in its fall, it's like, when a planet is in its fall, it's like whatever that planet stands for kind of doesn't get the respect it deserves in that sign, right? Its qualities or its true potential are sort of downplayed a little bit. And so in this case, the sun moving into Libra, the sun is our identity and how we sort of shine out in the world, right? It is that sort of our soul's kind of notion of the ideal vision. It is again, I love this phrase that Demetra George uses. It's the central organizing principle that everything else revolves around. So there's this sense of specialness, and look at me with the sun, right? The sun rules Leo. So when the sun moves into Libra, the sign of partnership, right? The sign of the other, then the sun has to take a bit of a back seat, and it can't be all about, all about me sort of thing, right? It has to be, it has to consider the others. And so, the sun moving into Libra, and Libra says, welcome. And the sun, kind of announces itself. I'm here. Everybody look at me. And Libra's like, yeah, but we're all here too, right? And we all have an equal role to play. So it's kind of like that. So the sun moves into Libra. And the thing about this, though, when a planet moves into this territory, like being in its fall, it can be a chance to see things from a sort of a different perspective. It can, it's sort of this like, a chance to sometimes realize that there's a different way to do things. It's like, my way is not necessarily the only way, that kind of thing. So it's a real time when we move into Libra season to consider these concepts of the other, of relating, of harmony and balance and justice. Libra is the sign of the scales, and sort of coming together at the center point. So that is like the backdrop of Libra season, but there are lots of things going on around this time that are really asking us to kind of, like I was saying earlier, question this concept of like, what does balance really mean, right? And so right before the sun moves into Libra, we've got Mercury in Libra squaring Pluto in Capricorn. So Mercury at 24 degrees of Libra will be squaring Pluto at 24 degrees of Capricorn. And this is the first of 3 times this is going to happen, because Mercury is stationing retrograde right on the 27th. So it's going to move over the same territory 3 times. And in that process, because Pluto's not going anywhere too quickly, Mercury is going to come into this square with Pluto 3 times. So it's going to happen. So it happens today, the time you're watching this video, if you're watching it on the 22nd of September 2021. And, excuse me, then it's going to happen again on October 1st, and for the 3rd and final time on November 2nd. We're going to have, so this is like an energy that's like trying to tell us something here, when these aspects repeat, there's a reason for that. It's something we need to pay attention to. And this is interesting. I've got this, and I think I forgot the chart in the other room. I may duck out and get it, but I might not. It might not be all that important for you to see it. But we've got, with Pluto at 24 Capricorn, I've been telling you many, many times now, this has been in an exact square with my Saturn-Venus conjunction, right, in the 8th house. And so now... Now I've got this situation going on. We've all got this square happening from Mercury to Pluto, and I'm not finished yet. There's another piece of the puzzle. But I've also got Pluto in a square to my Saturn-Venus. And we've got, which is also conjunct goddess Eris right now. So Eris, the dwarf planet, is sitting right on my Saturn-Venus conjunction, which is squaring Pluto exactly. This is like, if there was a word that meant more intense than intense, that would be it. So if you know what that word is, let me know below. But anyway, Eris I haven't talked about Eris in a while, right? I've been trying to stick to the more like the traditional planets, and then the three outer planets, and I usually bring Chiron into the mix as well. But I haven't spoken about asteroids or other things for a while. Trying to keep it simple because things can get really kind of complicated, too complex. But I think this is a good time to remind us that Eris is in Aries. Eris is a very, very slow moving planet, farther out from, than Pluto kind of thing. So very slow moving. So, everybody alive right now has Eris and Aries. So when you're talking about looking at your personal birth chart, the thing to look at is not necessarily, I've got Eris and Aries, because everybody does. It's, okay, to a degree, what house is it sitting in, but is it making any exact sort of configurations to other planets, right? But like Pluto, Eris is a more, it's a generational planet, and it speaks to, it has personal meaning, but it also speaks to our collective experience very much, like the other outer planets do, right? Uranus and Neptune as well. So we have this situation going on where Pluto and Mercury, as I was saying, are in a square, and Mercury and Libra at the same time as this is going on is opposing Eris and Aries, so, and squaring Pluto, right? So there's like this T-square energy going on. It's like something's got to give. Some action needs to be taken to resolve the tension, to resolve the friction. That's what squares are about. And I'm actually, rather than pause here, I'm just going to duck out. I left the chart. I do want to show it to you. So give me 1 second. Be right back. Here I am. Like I said, no editing over here. I don't have time for that. So, okay, here's the chart. So I'm just going to show you here. Here's Mercury up here. Now this is on, the day of the equinox, the 22nd. So we just have the sun is just about, at the time of this chart, like literally just about to move into Libra. And Mercury will station retrograde in a few days' time on Monday, the 27th. Mercury there in Libra. There's Mars in Libra as well, right? And we have Mercury opposing Eris. And when the moon moves through Aries, like I was talking about at the beginning of the video, we've got Mercury opposing the moon, and the moon conjuncting Eris. And the moon's already passed over Chiron, who's also in Aries. And we've spoken about that piece before. Chiron moving through Aries, calling us all to look at the healing of our identity in some way, right? And then we have Pluto up here in Capricorn, making a square to all the stuff in Aries and Mercury, right? So to Eris and to Mercury, exactly, all at 24 degrees, you can see. We've also got Saturn up here in Aquarius as well. And Saturn is in a trine with Mars in Libra. And the other thing I wanted to point out is Uranus and Taurus down here opposing Venus in Scorpio. Okay, so there's a lot of prickly stuff going on. Oh, we also have, one more thing, which is less prickly. We have Mercury still in a trine to Jupiter. And that is energy that's sticking around. I talked about that in last week's video, but when I talked about the Pisces full moon. But that's energy that's sticking around for a while too because of the retrograde, right? So Mercury's going back and forth over that same spot. And so we'll kind of continue to trine Jupiter. And so when we see that, that's a bit of, that's a bit of a, something to kind of keep in the back of our mind, something to hang on to during a time that may feel pretty kind of intense. There is still this opportunity for, grand plans, big ideas, for a sense of optimism amidst the chaos and confusion and discord and all of that, right? That some of these other configurations are suggesting. So I want you to remember that. But I feel like I'm kind of all over the place here, but I just want to circle back to Eris and finish that thought. So Eris and Aries. Eris, the goddess of strife and discord. Eris speaks very much to this kind of like the feminine warrior archetype, right? Eris was the sister of Mars in the mythology. And Eris, where Eris goes, there can be this feeling of disharmony, the opposite of what Libra is trying to bring about, right? Disagreement and discord. If you've ever heard music that's like discordant, it's like it rattles your cage a little. It's kind of confusing, right? It's hard to kind of it can make you feel unsettled. And so that's the energy of Eris. In this configuration to Mercury, the planet of our mind, our communications, our messages exchanged, our mobility, our thoughts. Mercury, the messenger and the shapeshifter, right? Mercury, the guide of souls. Mercury, the one who was the only god who could move between the worlds, right? So, and that speaks very much to the retrograde of Mercury, which we're going to talk about in more detail in a minute. And then Pluto, Lord of the Underworld. Pluto, digging deep. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to get up again and run away for a second because I forgot another book that I hesitated. Like, I was kind of like, do I want to talk about this? Do I want to read this? But I'm going to. Give me 1 second. Just going over here to my desk and grabbing my Richard Tarnas, Cosmos and Psyche. So I just want to read to you from Richard Tarnas's book. And I know that's backwards to you because I'm using I use my phone to record these videos because that's the easiest for me, and I'm using the back camera, so it looks backwards. But what I want to do is I just want to read to you here Richard Tarnas's description of Pluto in terms of what Pluto signifies, because he does a really good job, and I don't have my glasses, so I kind of have to hold it a little bit far away from me to read this. But so what Richard Tarnas says is Pluto is associated with the principle of elemental power, depth, and intensity, with that which compels, empowers, and intensifies whatever it touches, sometimes to overwhelming and catastrophic extremes, with the primordial instincts, libidinal and aggressive, destructive and regenerative, volcanic and cathartic, eliminative, transformative, ever evolving, with the biological processes of birth, sex, and death, the cycle of death and rebirth, the upheaval, breakdown, decay, and fertilization, violent purgatorial discharge of pent-up energies, purifying fire, situations of life and death, extremes, power struggles, all that is titanic, potent, and massive. Pluto represents the underworld, an underground in all senses, elemental, geological, instinctual, political, social, sexual, urban, criminal, mythological, demonic. It is the dark, mysterious, taboo, and often terrifying reality that lurks beneath the surface of things, beneath the ego, societal conventions, and the veneer of civilization, beneath the surface of the earth, that is periodically unleashed with destructive and transformative force. Pluto impels, burns, consumes, transfigures, resurrects. In mythic and religious terms, it is associated with all myths of descent and transformation, and with all deities of destruction and regeneration, death and rebirth. Dionysus, Hades, and Persephone, Pan, Medusa, Lilith, Inanna, Isis, and Osiris, the volcano goddess Pele, Quetzalcoatl, the serpent power, Kundalini, Shiva, Kali, Shakti. So, whew, that doesn't give you goosebumps, right? So that's powerful, powerful, powerful. Pluto is this transformative, regenerative, volcanic, force. it's like sometimes I think of Uranus as the volcano, and Uranus and Taurus shaking the earth literally, but Uranus is more like the lightning strike. Pluto is the volcano, right? And Eris, you know, associated with Mars and this warrior like energy, but also very, very, I think, connected to the Plutonian, you know, energy as well. So, but in a more yin, or you know, connected more to the feminine. And when I say feminine, please know I'm not talking about gender here, right? I'm talking about energetically speaking, and we all have those notions of masculine and feminine within us, right? So that's what I'm talking about. So there's something going on here. This is like a very, very transformative time, it feels like. And on the surface, it may seem like not much is going on and not much is changing, right? Well, case in point, we had an election here in Canada. If you're not in Canada, you may have heard, and obviously the rest of us who were paying attention and who voted would know that what ended up happening was our Prime Minister, right, JT, Justin Trudeau, he you know, nothing much changed. He ended up back in power with a minority government, you know, and there's all kinds of things we could say about that, but this is not a video about that. So, but my point is, in bringing that up, that on the surface, it may seem like not much is changing, not much is going on. You know, it's Libra season, let's get some balance restored and all of that. But under the surface, there's a lot going on. And we have a lot of planets retrograde and Mercury about to station retrograde. But then in October, we've got, I have it over here, you know, Pluto is going to station direct on October 6th. Which is the day of the new moon in Libra. And then we will have Saturn stationing direct on October 10th. And then we have Jupiter stationing direct on October 18th. And finally, Mercury will also station direct on that same day, October 18th, which is interesting because, as I was saying, Mercury and Jupiter are in this trine, right? Kind of for an extended, like they're kind of hanging there for a while because of the retrograde. So like under the surface, there are things going on, and it is, and I mean this like in a like in every sense of the word. And when I'm talking, you know, for us personally, can you sense that there's something going on under the surface for you right now? And what that might be? You know, does it feel like there is something that wants to kind of erupt? Does it feel like there are things that need to be acknowledged? That maybe have gone unacknowledged to date? Does it feel like there are things you need to get out of you that you're having a hard time knowing how or even allowing that to happen? Is there a sense of internal kind of discord going on for you that needs to be brought back into balance or integrity, right? I have all the books around today, but another book I'm going to mention that I started reading last week is Martha Beck's new book, The Way of Integrity, right? And integrity has always been a big area of interest for me personally. And my notion of what it means to be in integrity has evolved over time. And this is, you know, the book is interesting, and it's helpful to kind of really examine that more intensely, right? So Just taking a pause here to see kind of where I'm going to go with this next. So as Mercury retrogrades, it's a really good time for us to take a step back. And it can feel like it's not the time to take a step back. It feels like, it can feel like there's so much to do. We have so many things to take care of. Maybe things that have been on the back burner. Maybe things that have been neglected. Maybe things that we haven't had time for. Things that feel urgent, right? And we may not like even have a sense of exactly what that is, but it feels like we need to do something. But what Mercury is saying right now is actually what you need to do is slow your roll and just take a step back and stop rushing around and trying to, solve everything right now, and revisit, all those Mercury retrograde words: revisit, revitalize, review, reconnect, recalibrate, reconsider, restore, reconcile, reveal, reverse. Mercury retrogrades can bring about sort of reversals, right? Reinvest. There's so many words. When a planet retrogrades, any planet, it's a time where that energy is sort of internalized more, right? And so that's the idea here. Mercury is metaphorically going into the underworld, right? When Mercury retrogrades. So that underworld is sort of like, it's the internal landscape. And so going inside to contemplate, when Mercury's in Libra, this notion of balance, right? And what it means for each of us individually. And balance may look very, very different. We have this idea of balance, and I've written about this before a long time ago on my blog, but we have this idea that like balance looks a certain way, but in reality, balance may look like, your idea of balance may look very different from my idea of balance, right? And so it's time to kind of think about, like, what does balance mean to you on every level? What does balance mean in sense of, like the very mundane things, like work-life balance, like, the balance or lack thereof that exists in your physical body. The balance, the concept of balance in your financial life, for example. Like, and everybody has Libra somewhere in their chart, right? And when Mercury's retrograding through Libra, it's the time to look at those themes, whatever house Libra sits for each of us, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. And that's really the lens we can focus this through, like looking at balance through that particular, like those life themes, right? And that's a good time to focus on those particular life themes. So that's what I would recommend. What else do I want to say? I talked about integrity briefly, and on Saturday, the 25th, we have Mars in Libra. I showed you this on the chart, trining Saturn in Aquarius. And to me, like, the phrase that comes to mind there is acting Mars on our integrity, Saturn. So, like, what does it mean to be in integrity for you? And in Martha Beck's book, she talks about this notion of integrity versus, like duplicity. So when you're in integrity, you're whole. It's this concept of being whole unto the self sort of thing, right? You're a whole, like you're not fragmented all over the place. You're whole, and you are aligned. Your internal and your external worlds are aligned. It's this alignment of the mind body kind of spirit connection, those kinds of things. People in integrity aren't necessarily comfortable. People in integrity are not necessarily, doesn't mean everybody likes you. when you're in integrity. In fact, being in integrity can piss a lot of people off. But, you know, if you're out of integrity and you're doing things just to please people or saying things just to please people, which Libra can do sometimes, just to not rock the boat, are you really comfortable? Is that in integrity for you? So, you know, some food for thought there. So that Mars trine Libra action that's happening is sort of this, I feel like it's this, you know, sort of taking action or, you know, kind of acting on our integrity in some way. And I mentioned to you also that just before that, just after the equinox, and after we have that exact square between Mercury and Pluto, the first one, and Eris, we've got Venus. This is on Thursday, tomorrow, the 23rd. Venus in Scorpio, right? We've talked about Venus in Scorpio in a previous video. Venus is in the sign of detriment in Scorpio, or if you don't like the word detriment, it can be considered the sign of exile or antithesis. You know, far away from home, not having the tools it needs to do its job. And so Venus is in Scorpio opposing Uranus and Taurus. Venus rules both Libra and Taurus. So we got, like, you know, you can come at things from so many different ways. And I always use the phrase, all roads lead home, right? So Venus, this is another energy that speaks to the feminine, that speaks to issues around women and children, and also around relating and harmony and balance and all of those things, right? And there's this lightning strike from Uranus across the sky. It's another way, like, you know, that Eris, that's that discordant energy, that Eris and Aries that's squaring Mercury. And well, here we have like that same kind of feeling going on here. There's some real disruption. You know, what's that phrase from oh my God, I'm losing my marbles here. There's a disturbance in the force. That's what I'm thinking of. So it's like I think there's a disturbance in the feminine force, almost like that's how it feels, right? To me, anyways. So there's something going on here, and I feel like there may be we may see a lot of stories in the news, or in our own spheres, you know, of influence, or our own spheres of life, where we see issues around women, and maybe issues around women and children, and some sense of like disruption or discord, or you know, that Plutonian volcanic force, or the underworldly themes of Pluto, and the lightning strikes of Uranus, and that kind of thing. So, you know, just my 2 cents about that. The last thing I want to say to you, I want to do 2 more things before I take it through the signs. Just a little bit more on Libra, right? Like all the obvious things that we've already spoken about, and, you know, Libra being the sign of balance and harmony and justice and equality and relating. You know, ultimately Libra seeks balance, right? And I kind of touched on this already, but sometimes in an effort to restore balance, things they have to get uncomfortable, which is the opposite of what Libra wants. Libra wants it comfortable and pretty, and everything to look good on the surface. And Libra wants everybody to just get along and, you know, just like look at all sides, and can't we just sit here on the fence and everything will be fine? But ultimately Libra's job is to restore balance. And so You know, sometimes being in the center, we lose, like when we're just always walking that middle path, like we don't stand for anything. We lose sight of anything that's outside our little kind of bubble on the fence that we're sitting on. We sometimes, you know, it's like we lose sight of what's not in our comfortable kind of surroundings. And we need that medicine of Aries, Libra's opposite sign. Aries ruled by Mars, right? To kind of veer off the beaten path, to get off the fence and take a stand based on our, right? Aries, I, me, mine, our desires, our needs, our will, our sovereignty, our right to take up space, these sorts of things. So, you know, sometimes we need to kind of consider who we are as a whole person, that notion of integrity, outside of our partnerships. So that's one piece of it. But then conversely, if we kind of go too far off in our own direction and we don't have any consideration for anybody else but ourselves, and we only want to fulfill our own personal desires and interests and needs, then we also view the world through a very narrow lens, right? And so sometimes we need to be open to the other and open to other people's worldviews, so that we can learn something from each other. And, you know, we have to not live in a bubble of our pretty little world that we've created, kind of thing. So it's like, it's a continuum, right? And what happens is, you know, it's this notion of, like, if you think if you think politically, for example, the extreme right and the extreme left have things in common. So it's this notion of you go so far out on the spectrum that you come back to center on the other side, right? Two sides of the same coin. Anyways, I'm getting very sort of philosophical and wordy here, and hopefully I'm not losing you. But what I want to do before I go through the signs is I want to kind of distill it all down for you in a little passage that I'm going to read from one of the books I love to refer to often, which is Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home by Toko-pa Turner, right? Who is a Canadian woman. And I love her work. She talks a lot about dreams, which sometimes, I'm not going to lie to you, like, I have a crazy, crazy dream life. And I always have since I was a kid. And my dreams are so vivid and so full and so wild that I get overwhelmed when people talk about, you know, trying to kind of analyze that and drill down into what that means. And sometimes I do, and sometimes it works out for me, and sometimes it's like, good luck to any expert who tries to decipher that. But anyway, she talks a lot about dreams, and sometimes that part loses me a little, I will say. But really, 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 there is so much goodness and food for thought in her work. And this is a passage here that I really, really spoke to me, and I feel like it kind of encapsulates everything that I'm sort of talking about here in this video. And so maybe if I've lost you at this point, this can bring you back to, okay, now I see what she's talking about, right? So this passage is called Necessary Rebellion. So though we think of rebellion as warrior-like, it is really about making the self vulnerable in a heavily armored world. The act of rebellion is to expose and to be exposed. in those places that have been kept hidden far too long, right? And I think about all these things we've been talking about. Eris, I think of Pluto, right? So, because the rebel chooses to speak up with her voice, Mercury, and her action, Mars, against tradition. She risks her life and the security of false belonging, Uranus, for the chance at being truly alive. In doing so, she incites aliveness in others. There is a pivotal juncture in every heroine's journey when she stands alone. She is led by the depth of her convictions to take a stand, to name the unaddressed, to call out of hiding the secret malaise in her community. She arrives at a standpoint not without doubts, but in spite of them. And sometimes there is a hefty price to pay, like being the target of criticism, or worse, rejection from the group, which is at odds with her truth. The willingness to rebel from the expected norms, roles, and silent contracts of establishment comes out of knowing that one cannot afford to build resentment. Resentment, which comes from the decision to go against one's truth, to go against one's integrity, right? Embitters the self. It somatizes in the body, and takes on the burden of pain as if it were ours alone. The whistleblower, on the other hand, reveals a shared complicity. It says, I expect more from myself and from you. And in that stance, the pain becomes, in a sense, communal. The dissenting voice speaks for the voiceless, and in some ironic plot twist, it is in the revolt against outdated belonging that real solidarity can be born. Your willingness to speak the truth about something that disagrees with you is what allows for the undamming of communication, Mercury retrograde, giving all involved a fertile place to grow and the chance to build a real village. It takes a village, Libra. So anyway, I could dissect that and, for days, but in relation to the astrology. But anyway, I hope that you found that helpful, that piece, and sort of that allows you to kind of integrate the seemingly unrelated things that I'm talking about in the video here. And so what I want to leave you with is Mercury retrograde in Libra through the signs, so that you can get a sense of where there is, where the opportunity is ripe for you to take a step back and to pause and to go on this Mercury retrograde journey, considering, what does balance really mean to you? What does it mean to be in integrity? All of these things in relation to the Libra house in your chart specifically. I mean, in general, but you can kind of look at where this is specifically happening in your chart, and you can get a sense of like, this is a good place to focus these thoughts and these ideas and this whole notion of reviewing or revisiting or revitalizing or rethinking, reconceptualizing, restoring, all those Mercury retrograde words, revamping, the themes of the house that Libra sits for you. So without further ado, let's dive in. And we're going to start. Well, just before I say that, I mentioned it earlier, but a retrograde can bring about like a kind of reversal, right? And so things may be going one way, and then all of a sudden they change direction. Retrogrades can bring things from the past back into our kind of awareness as well, for reconsideration maybe, right? For a second look, so to speak. So there's a possibility that those kinds of things may occur as well. And of course, I said nothing about the typical Mercury retrograde snafus that we might expect in terms of communications and technology and travel plans and that kind of thing. And of course, that's a possibility because it always is during a Mercury retrograde. But those things happen because they are reminders that we can't be going full steam ahead all the time. They are messages from, you know, the universe to stop and slow down and think about what we're doing, you know, and sort of make a plan, and sometimes recapitulate and rethink the plan. And so oftentimes, if things are going really awry, that can be a real signal that you're spinning your wheels, and you need to slow down, even when it feels like I don't have time to slow down, especially when it feels like that, actually. Okay, so I note on that. But let's jump in and start with Libra here. I'm going to try to make this quick because we're almost at the hour mark. And obviously, Libra, for you, you know, this is your season. This is the sun is moving into your sign. So happy birthday to Libra sun signs. And we are talking about, when you're listening to these forecasts, this general forecast here, we're talking about listening to your rising sign first and foremost, you know, then your sun and your moon. But if you are a Libra sun, then happy birthday to you. And we're moving into your season. And so with Mercury retrograding in your sign, you know, it is a time to kind of really rethink your concept of self in a way. So because the first house is all about the self, it speaks to themes of our physical vitality, our body, our appearance, our approach to the world and how the world perceives us, you know, our personality, our character. These are first house themes. And so with Mercury retrograding there, that is a time to really rethink some of those things. Maybe review, you know, review your kind of like, how am I feeling in my body? What tweaks and changes can I make? Is there something I used to do that I haven't been doing anymore that I maybe want to go back to? I want to revisit that during this Mercury retrograde. What is your relationship like to yourself? Mercury and Libra, the first house, right? So like relating to the self, you know, really comes to mind here when I think about that. So are you feeling balanced in your body, you know, in your vitality? Are you feeling balanced in your approach to the world? Do you feel that, you know, people are perceiving you as you really are? And if not, why not, sort of thing? You know, is there, like, it can be a good time, you know, if you're a Libra sun in particular, and this is your solar return time, it can really be a good time to kind of do a year in review, right? Meaning, like, what's gone on for you over the last 12 months. That's a good time to do that during a Mercury retrograde. And even though it's not New Year's as we would consider it, and, you know, what might you rethink, like how might you review, like, and what are the results of that review? What do you want to maybe change moving forward, or what do you want to take with you that worked moving forward, right? So, or even if this is in your first house, you know, you can still kind of do that in relation to, like I was saying, those first house themes. So I'm going to leave that there for you, Libra, and I'm going to move to Virgo now, where Virgo, we've got Mercury retrograding in your second house, right? So this is a time for reviewing and revisiting and conceptualizing or rethinking, all things revolving around your finances, your personal finances, your personal resources. So it can be money, it can be time, it can be energy, it can be your material possessions. The second house can be what, you know, it's this notion of like, what do you value? What do you place value on? What are your core values? What is your, you know, your sense of self-worth? What are you worth? So this can be a time for you to do things like review your bank statements, you know, and get your banking in order. It can be a time to revisit, like, maybe a money-making idea that you had, and breathe new life into that. It can be a time where you're redoing things then maybe you might be spending money on things like renovations or doing, beautifying your space, or on material things, or on getting your needs met. Even, your basic needs is the second house. How do we get our basic needs met? There could be some review going on as far as that's concerned, and a sense of like, is that area of life, or is this area of your life in balance, right? The second house. Are things in your second house, are they feeling in balance? Are they feeling in integrity? Or does something need to change there, and be tweaked in order to bring things more into balance, right? So we're going to leave that there for you, Virgo. We're going to move to Leo now, where we have Mercury retrograding through your third house. And so for you, Leo, this is a time where there is an opportunity for review and reflection and revisiting, and all of those Mercury retrograde words, themes that have to do with communications, that have to do with your immediate environment and the people in your immediate environment. So your cousins, your siblings, your neighbors, your community members, your team members, your peers, your friends that feel like family. Those relationships, perhaps, because this is in Libra, communication in relationships with those people, themes of communicating in general, all things communication can be revisited, and tweaked and revitalized. So it could be like, sometimes the third house speaks to things like marketing and commerce and those sorts of things. So, it could be like an old marketing campaign, like if you're somebody that's in advertising or something like that, there is some reconsideration of that, or that gets reviewed and revitalized maybe. Or it could be some project you were maybe involved in that had to do with, communication in some way, and that's being revisited or reviewed, or rethought, or something, along those lines from the past can come back for reconsideration. So, are you feeling balanced in the way you communicate? Are you feeling balanced in relation to your immediate environment, your community? Are you, like, this can be things revolving around like relationships with siblings and communications with siblings, as well. Maybe if you've even fallen out of touch with a sibling or a cousin or somebody that's feels like, that kind of relation to you, then that there can be, that person can come back into your sphere. There can be a reconnection there, right? Mercury retrograde can bring about reconnection in some way. So those are all things to consider. And we're going to move on to Cancer now. And Cancer, for you have Mercury retrograding in your fourth house of your home and your family and your place of living, and your, like real estate matters, your sense of emotional security. So for you, Cancer, Mercury retrograde here, this can be bringing back things revolving around your family from the past. This can also, it's a time for you to reflect on familial relationships, potentially, because it is in Libra, right? And there can be some revisiting of those things right now, of those themes. There can be reconsideration. There can be like renovations on the home front, Mercury retrograde in the fourth house. There can be, like a rearranging of things. There can be a reconsideration of like some kind of real estate deal. There could be This could even, like cancers are often very tied to this notion of familial ancestry and that kind of thing. And I can see this as being a time where there is something going on around that, like a digging into the ancestry um, in some way, shape, or form. Um, and of course, don't forget that we talked about in the intro this idea of what does balance feel like for you in this realm of life, right? In this fourth house realm. And are you feeling an integrity there? Are you feeling in, what can you do in this sphere of life to bring things more into balance? So, so that's for you, Cancer. We're going to move to Gemini now, where Gemini, you have Mercury retrograding in your fifth house. So this affects themes of children, of how you have fun in life, pleasure pursuits, what brings you joy, your creative sort of projects and self-expression, that sort of thing. And so with Mercury retrograding there, in Libra, this can be relationships with children that are being revisited and reviewed, um, reconsidered. There can be things like, this notion of like what brings you pleasure and joy and how you have fun in life. Maybe things that you used to do in the past for fun. There's a reconsidering of that, or like a reversal, or some, those things are coming back around for consideration again, for reconsideration, right? Some creative project that you have going on, it could be a good time for like tweaking there, reviewing that, breathing new life into it in some way, shape, or form. It could be things going on in your kids' lives and relationships as far as they're concerned as well. That's also a possibility with this fifth house Mercury retrograde, right, in Libra. But ultimately consider, what could you do to bring a greater sense of balance into this realm of life, right? And what are things feeling out of integrity for you, out of balance? And if so, how can this Mercury retrograde period be used to restore that sense of balance and whatever that means for you? So, okay, that's for you, Gemini. We're going to move to Taurus next, where Taurus, you've got Mercury retrograding through your sixth house. So, for you, this is bringing about themes of health and illness, of your daily routine, the work you do on the day-to-day, whether that be paid or unpaid, that kind of the daily grind. Pets as well, how you are in service. These are all sixth house themes. And so when Mercury is retrograding through there, this can be a time to revisit some of these things. Maybe reviewing health routines. Maybe there's a resurgence of some health issue that you were dealing with, but the reason it's coming back up is because maybe it wasn't fully resolved, or maybe there's a resolution that comes to pass during this Mercury retrograde time, of an old health issue, or maybe there is a reviewing going on, or a need to review your daily schedule and to bring that back into balance in some way, shape, or form. Because remember, this is happening in Libra, the sign of balance, which we talked all about in the introduction. And so, this can be a time to consider, what does balance look like on the day-to-day for me? This can be a time where you are maybe, Libra, the sign of relationship, in the house of health. There could be some issue going on with partner's health, or health kind of issue that's impacting relationships in some way, or health issues with pets that need to be revisited or reviewed, or reconsidered, or reversed in some way. And so, those are some things to consider. And I will leave you with that, Taurus. And I'm going to move on to Aries now, where we have Mercury retrograding through your 7th house of one-to-one relationships, right? So Libra is the sign of relating. And so for you, you know, there can be a review of close personal relationships going on during a Mercury retrograde. And when I say close personal relationships, we're talking about not only significant others, but it could be close friends, family members, business partners, you know, that kind of thing. It could be contracts and agreements implicated here too in the 7th house. So, you know, it's a good time to review those things. You know, if you are looking at any kind of contract or agreement, it's a good time to really pay attention to, you know, make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. You know, you're not rushing into something. It is a possibility during a Mercury retrograde in Libra in the 7th house that old people come back into your life from the past, right? That's a possibility as well. And it's a good time for you, Aries, to consider the notion of balance in relationship and how you relate to others, right? And are you feeling an integrity there? And what can you do to bring a greater sense of balance around those relationship themes into your life? Yeah, and if it's like I was saying, if it's a contract or an agreement that is, you know, what's going on for you. It might be like an old contract coming up for review. It might be a contract you turned down that, you know, they're reoffering you with different terms, or something like that, possibly as well. So, you know, it's good advice for Mercury retrograde in the 7th, not to necessarily jump into a new relationship or even an old relationship that's new again. You know, and it's like take your time there. Take your time. No need to rush, kind of thing. So that's for you, Aries. And we're going to move on to Pisces now. So for you, Pisces, you've got the Mercury retrograding through your 8th house. And in Libra, right? That's where Libra sits for you. So this is bringing up themes for that have to do with this notion of other people's resources. So other people's time, money, energy, things like taxes, inheritance, mortgages, wills, debt, loans, bursaries, scholarships, all of those things. And other people's time and energy too, right? It's like how you commingle with other people in a very intimate way. It's your entanglements with other people. It is your psychological kind of depths as well, right? And the skeletons in the closet, so to speak. So it is this notion of that transformative death and rebirth cycle, right? That we were talking about in relation to Pluto earlier in the video. And so with Mercury retrograding here, there can be a review of things like, you know, partner's income or some kind of you know, something around that from the past comes back to be revisited, or it's a good time to reflect on, to review, to rethink, to reorganize things like taxes, you know, and insurance and that sort of thing. If there's been some kind of insurance situation going on, for example, I know that sounds very specific, but oftentimes we see this kind of a thing. You know, it might be a time where there's like botched communications. Just take your time there, be patient. You know, make sure that you're getting the information, that you're understanding the information, and that you are relaying information accurately as well. If it comes to things like, you know, insurance and taxes and those other things that I mentioned. Could be things like reviewing your will, you know, with a partner even, with Mercury retrograde in Libra. So, you know, those are some things for you to look at. Ultimately, we're talking about how can we bring a greater sense of balance into this area of life, right? And we talked all about balance and what that means, and that is often more complicated than it sounds on the surface. So we talked about all of that in the intro. So that's for you, Pisces, and we're going to move on to Aquarius now, where Aquarius, for you, you've got Mercury retrograding through Libra in your 9th house. Give me one sec. Thank you. So this is a time when there can be a reconsideration, a review, a recalibration, a revisitation of things revolving around, sort of like how you expand your horizons, of things like travel plans, like usually for like longer distance travel, teaching and learning and publishing, and your kind of worldview, and even things like your relationship to teachers or schools of thought or philosophies or those kinds of things, right? So because this is in Libra, the sign of relating, also the sign of balance. So the idea here for you, Aquarius, is bringing a sense of greater balance into this area of life. And it may be also like a revisitation of some of these things, like maybe, with COVID, like some kind of like plan for long distance travel was put on the back burner and now it's being reviewed or revisited. Maybe it is a time when like you're working on something related to school and higher learning, and there's a time when there's a lot of reviewing and maybe editing or researching or going over things with a fine-tooth comb sort of thing going on. So ultimately what we're looking for here is bringing a sense of greater balance, like using this Mercury retrograde to kind of consider, how can I bring a greater sense of balance to my life and specifically to this area of life? And what does that look like for me as an individual, right? So we talked a lot about the complexities of that in the introduction. So don't skip that. So we're going to move to Capricorn now. Capricorn, for you, Mercury is retrograding through your 10th house, right? 10th house Libra for you. And so this is a time where there can be a lot of rethinking, reconceptualizing, reviewing, revisiting things that have to do with your career, your worldly ambitions, the legacy you wish to leave, your relationship to authority and authority figures and your own authority. These are all 10th house themes. Maybe there is some rethinking of a career move. Maybe there is a revisiting of that in some way, shape, or form. There can be relationships that revolve around your career and your public life, right? 10th house, very much our public life and our public reputation and that kind of thing, that are being reconsidered or reviewed or reflected on, or any number of Mercury retrograde notions. So what else? Rethinking your public life in some way, taking a step back from that potentially, taking a step back from career, bringing a greater sense of balance, right? How can you bring a greater sense of balance to this area of life? Maybe there's been an imbalance going on between that like work-life balance idea, right? That notion. And it's time for you to review that and reconsider, and what does balance mean for you? Ultimately, when looked at through the lens of those 10th house themes, right? And it can be more complicated than meets the eye, as we talked about in the introduction. So I'm going to leave that for you, Capricorn, and I'm going to move on to Sagittarius now. And so for you, Sag, you've got Mercury retrograding through your 11th house of your friends and the group at large, right? The collective, any groups you're associated with, networks, even online communities, the people that can help you get where you want to go, right? 11th house is connected to our vision for the future and our supporters and our allies. And so these are all themes that are being revisited and reviewed during the Mercury retrograde. And maybe some snafus can happen around these people and the themes, the notion of group, right? With a Mercury retrograding there. But ultimately, it's a message to strike some balance there, Mercury retrograde in Libra. In the 11th, right? And bring a greater sense of harmony to this area of life. And what does balance look like for you when you're talking about these themes of the group and allies and supporters and friends and vision for the future? So, and oftentimes that can be more complicated than meets the eye, right? This notion of balance and what that means for us. So it could be like one of the things that comes to mind here when I'm thinking about this combination of Mercury, Libra, 11th house is like one-sided relationships, with friendship groups kind of thing, or reviewing, friendship groups and like who your allies and supporters are, right? And maybe revisiting friendship groups from the past, or organizations you were involved in, or networks you were involved in the past, and there's some kind of a review or a reversal or a reconsidering, whatever that is, kind of thing. So those are all things to consider for you, Sagittarius. And I'm going to move on to, last but not least, Scorpio in this case. So for you, Scorpio, Mercury is retrograding through your 12th house, Libra, in the 12th house. This is about bringing a greater sense of balance to your internal life. The 12th house is all about what goes on in the unseen realms, behind closed doors, quite literally, or more kind of, esoterically or metaphorically, or what have you. So it can be places behind closed doors. So what we do in retreat, it can be what we do on vacation, how we spend time in solitude and isolation, or it can be like being away from the world, maybe not by our own choosing even, because of, spending time in places like hospitals or rehab facilities or some kind of healthcare facility, or, that kind of thing. Prisons even, So, and it can also speak to the unseen in terms of like our unconscious and our dream life and our spiritual life. Anything sort of not visible, obviously visible. It can speak to secrets and even our own blind spots, things that we're not consciously aware of, eh? And things like our self-sabotaging behaviors, right? That often come from an unconscious place. So there's a lot to chew on there for you, Scorpio, but this is where Mercury is retrograding for you. And it's about bringing a greater sense of balance here. So let's take all this kind of airy-fairy notions and try to bring them down to earth, which is hard to do when you're talking about the 12th house. But in a practical sense, it's like reviewing maybe how you spend time in solitude and rest. Rethinking, maybe your downtime. Reconsidering your spiritual connections. Maybe an old spiritual practice that you were engaged in before comes back for reconsideration. Maybe, what else could this look like? Maybe there is something connected to one of those institutions that I mentioned, it comes up for review or rethinking, or it's being revisited in some way, shape, or form for whatever reason, right? Things that are kind of like buried in our unconscious could be coming up for you know, a second look, so to speak, at this Mercury retrograde. And it's all about this sense of, you know, trying to restore balance to our internal life in a sense, or, you know, potentially to our external life if we're talking about one of those sort of more practical, real world kind of places. It could be something that was hidden from view comes more into your awareness. You know, those are all some options, potential options. But think about restoring some balance to maybe how you spend time, how you spend your downtime. I think that would be a really good thing to do during this Mercury retrograde. And it might involve, you know, relationships in some way because it is in Libra. So, okay, I'm going to leave that there. And wow, did we say a lot today, right? In an hour and 20 minutes. And hopefully, hopefully it didn't be like freak you out or make you, you know, sort of fearful of the next period of time. But there's really nothing to fear. Like, one of the things I didn't say, and I wish I would have off the top of this video, that I feel like we're going into this period of time through the remainder of this year, you know, when we're starting to plunge in the Northern Hemisphere, we're starting to kind of plunge into the darker days, right? And there's this sense of like testing our mettle, if you know what I mean by that, right? When I'm talking about metal, like not metal like M-E-D-A-L, I'm talking about metal like M-E-T-T-L-E. So it's a time where it's like, we're really, you know, testing our sort of moral fiber, testing our tenacity and our strength of character and those kinds of things, right? Our fortitude. So, you know, that's, I think, ultimately what's being kind of asked of us right now. And there's a sense of like, it's a bit scary because it's uncertain, and it feels like I was talking at the beginning of the video, like there's this under the surface, things are brewing under the surface, right? But there's also this, you know, a word we use in our house is nervous-sighted, right? Like you're nervous, but you're excited too, because there's something new on the horizon. So I'm going to leave that there, and I hope you found that helpful. And I'm going to see you in a couple weeks' time here on YouTube. Otherwise, I will catch you on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to sign up to my mailing list, right, at astrologymaven.com. Take good care, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Or maybe not.